Hello, and welcome to the latest installment in our UXDX online series. I hope you're as excited as I am for our lineup this evening. And I know that that's the main thing that you've come here for, but I want to give a very quick introduction to UXDX and why we host these sessions. So at UXDX, our mission is to help companies shift from building software using waterfall or water scrumfall, as a lot of companies use, to empowered autonomous product teams. And the reason why that's our mission is because we believe it's a more effective, efficient, sustainable, and innovative way to work, particularly in a high change environment. So if you're in a company that maybe is running a couple of projects a year, it makes sense to build a team, put them over here, disband it, build them somewhere else. But in a lot of companies, particularly the ones I've worked in, there's hundreds, literally hundreds of projects going on at any given time. So in that case, it makes sense to get people really understanding a customer in a particular part of your product, understanding what the business goals are for that, and let them iterate towards better, more successful products. So that's really easy to say, oh, we'll shift from waterfall to autonomous product teams, but it's really hard to do in practice because it involves changing so many different parts of the business. And that's where the talks come in. So no talk is going to cover every part of that journey, but they come and touch on little elements of how people are modernizing and what they're doing differently to enable this kind of transition in their organizations. So hopefully when you're listening to the talks, you can start thinking of some questions about how can you apply these changes in your context. And that's great. The speakers are really excited to hear your questions. So please feel free to kind of put them in either the chat box on the side at uxdx.com, or if you're watching this on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, whichever platform you're watching this on, please just put the comments in there and we'll be monitoring those and we'll put those questions to the speakers. Now, sometimes we get so many questions that we can't answer them within the time of our session today. And that's why we have the UXDX community Slack group. And in there, one of the channels is Ask the Speakers. So anything that we don't have time to get through today, we'll put the questions in there and we'll invite the speakers to come and answer those questions for you. But that's enough about UXDX. You're here to listen to our talks. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker for this evening, and it's Radhika Dutt, who will be talking about how a radical product vision helps you build successful products and avoid product diseases. So I'd like to welcome Radhika to the stage. Hello.
Thank you so much, and I'm really excited to be here. So, true to the name radical, we are going to be challenging a lot of conventional thinking in this next hour. And what I want to share with you is, where some of this conventional thinking goes wrong and what do we do instead? So let's start by challenging this first idea, which is so pervasive, which is that your product is successful when you reach this nirvana of customer delight. What we've learned is, if your product is delighting people, that's when it's successful. And there are all these words that get thrown around. Words like, we have to be user-centric, customer-driven. We have to transform to be product-led. And there's design thinking thrown around. But the main idea behind this is that, to be customer-centric, we have to give customers what they want by iterating quickly. And when I work with companies, the quote I hear so often from leaders and executives is, we have to ask customers for feedback and then we have to be lean and agile to deliver it. Many of our companies that have gone through agile transformation recently, a lot of that agile transformation was with this purpose of being able to deliver whatever the customer is asking for by being agile, so we can be faster at delivering that, right? When we step back for a moment, what we realize is it's really time to call BS on this. The nirvana for our product should not be customer delight. And I want to give you a real example for why that's the case. I want to show you a real life example where, being agile and delighting customers actually it doesn't guarantee a successful product. And I want to share the example of a startup called Knack. This was many years ago. The founder of Knack, Paul, had come to me and he was telling me about his startup. he had been inspired by the suspended coffee movement, which started in Italy about 100 years ago. And if you haven't heard of suspended coffee, the way it works is you pay for 2 coffees. One is for yourself, what you drink, and the second is paid forward for someone who could use a random act of kindness. Now, Paul was inspired by this suspended coffee movement, and he built an app so that people could pay it forward and give what he called random acts of coffee. So he started Knack to do that, and Paul shared his numbers with me. And if you looked at his numbers looked fantastic. He had an ardent group of daily active users. He had high NPS scores. And he even had organic growth, which, as product managers, that's about as good as it gets, right? When you get organic word of mouth growth. But Paul was not happy. Why? Because there was one metric that he realized was really not good, and that was a key indicator. That one metric that he really was looking to was this metric of, how many people are actually using the app to spread kindness and buy someone else a coffee. And it turned out it was 0. Everyone was coming to the app to actually get free coffee. They were all there to get free coffee. No one was actually spreading kindness, right? So what went wrong? It turned out that Paul had caught many product diseases. And these product diseases are so easy to catch. They really are ubiquitous. And I've caught so many of these diseases along my own journey, right? And so let's do a checkup. We'll do a checkup where I'm going to share some examples of these diseases that Paul had caught. And, feel free to share in chat, for example, share if you've seen these diseases. So this first disease is obsessive sales disorder, right? Obsessive sales disorder happens when, we are focusing on the short term. We're trying to delight customers in the short term, but in the long term, it's not really getting you closer to your vision, right? In this case, Paul was giving customers what they wanted, and what they wanted was more free coffee. And he was even investing his own money on funding coffees in the app. And just, customers wanted more and more, right? And so that's obsessive sales disorder. In your company, you might be seeing a version of this where maybe you're working on custom features and kind of random features that customers might be asking for, but you feel, maybe that's not right for your long-term vision for your product, right? That's obsessive sales disorder. Feel free to share in chat if you've seen this disease before. This next disease is hypermetricemia. Right? Hypermetricemia happens when we're obsessed with metrics and analytics and moving metrics up and to the right. In this case, all of Paul's metrics were looking fantastic, but those weren't the right metrics to be measuring in the first place. It didn't matter how much time people were spending on the site or the number of, ardent users that he had. What really mattered was anyone using this app to actually spread kindness, to pay it forward, to buy someone a coffee, right? And so that's hypermetricemia, where we're obsessed with metrics without really thinking about, is this the right metric to be measuring in the first place? And then this next disease is narcissist complex. This happens when we're so focused on our own goals. We're focused on looking inwards at our needs. And we're so focused on being inwards focused that we become disconnected from what the customer actually needs. So in Paul's case, for example, Paul felt like if he just had this feature to be able to pay for someone's coffee, that, well, he would use this app to buy someone a coffee. And so he figured, if he just had a payments feature to buy someone a coffee, well, others would use this to spread kindness. And it turned out that's not how it is, right? And so especially if you're in a very engineering-led organization, you might see narcissist complex where we're thinking, of some shiny object that if we just release this, customers are going to love it, right? And that's an example of narcissist complex. Okay, So why do these diseases happen? They're so pervasive, and I've seen these diseases across every industry and size of company I've worked at. And I've worked in, broadcast, media and entertainment, robotics, advertising, even wine. And I've worked in various sizes of companies, all the way from startups to government agencies and multinational companies. Right? And what I found is that these diseases are common across industries and sizes of companies because they're a symptom of not being vision driven, meaning when our iterations are not driven by a clarity of vision and strategy, that's when we catch these product diseases. So what do we do instead, right? And why does this happen? Let's look at kind of how does iteration fit into this whole picture. The analogy I like to give, and this very visual analogy, is that, being lean and agile, it's the equivalent of having a fast car. It is absolutely great to have a Ferrari or a McLaren. It does help you get to where you want to go faster, right? And I am absolutely not criticizing customer feedback in any way. Customer feedback is important to get. So in this analogy, customer feedback is like sitting in your fast car and stopping to ask someone for directions to make sure you're heading the right way. But when we step back, when we stop for a moment and we think about it, what we realize is we're in the driver's seat, and before we get into this fast car and start driving, and before we stop and ask for directions, we have to know, where do we want to go? Like we need to know the destination and roughly how we're going to get there, right? And only then are we going to be able to get there faster. So this is where radical product thinking comes in. Radical product thinking is a methodology for building world-changing products. And the way it's structured is that it gives you this step-by-step practical process that helps you build these world-changing products. And it's a book that's available in bookstores, anywhere where books are sold. What it gives you is this system to engineer the change you want to bring about. What I mean by that is, if you want to engineer change in the radical product thinking way, it means starting with this clarity of vision. What's the end state you want to bring about? Then translating that into a strategy, meaning, what is a set of actionable steps that to translate this vision into reality? Then into a set of priorities, then into hypothesis-driven execution and measurement, and finally, you can apply all of these ideas to engineer the culture you need for innovation. And in the radical product thinking way, each of these elements, they are designed as tools that you can use to communicate and bring your entire team with you on the journey. Now, until now, everything that I've said to you, you might hear this and say, well, I've heard words like vision, strategy, I've heard about prioritization. What is new about this? I don't hear anything radical. And now let's just get ready for something radical. What I want to just shake up for us is we need to unlearn so much about what we know about what is a good vision, because it's just really toxic, because we've learned that a good vision is big, hairy, audacious, unchanging. It has to be memorable so that it's a slogan. All of these ideas need to be shaken up, because these are based on ideas where we think that vision comes from a leader at the top and everyone else is just following along. And that's not how creating change works. And so we need to forget all these old ideas about what is a good vision and rethink things. And let's try this exercise, right? Here's why this vision, here's why these broad, unchanging visions are not good for any organization. And the example I'll use is NAC's vision, right? Like, this wasn't NAC's vision, but I could have written NAC's vision as follows: contributing to human progress by empowering people to spread kindness. Right? What is wrong with this vision? Because this is what we're taught is a good vision. It's broad, it sounds inspiring, it's short, memorable. And so let's do this exercise. Give me wild and crazy ideas as to, why, give me ideas for products that could be described by this vision. And since I'm asking this question, I'll give you the first example. You know, this idea of contributing to human progress by empowering people to spread kindness, that could describe my parenting philosophy. I am empowering my kids to spread kindness, and that's contributing to human progress, right? This could also be the vision for a company that is nudging people to donate to charities. So, an app that nudges you to donate to charities, right? It could be a vision for a social media company. I mean, literally anything goes when you have a vision that's so broad. Your vision is no longer acting like a filter. You can pretty much hold up any feature and say, should I do this or not? And this vision says, sure, go for it, right? What you need instead is a filter that says, actually, no, don't do this. And so what we need is not this broad and fluffy vision. What you want is a vision that articulates the who, what, why, when, and how. Meaning, whose world are you changing? And it's not everyone's. What does their world look like today? Meaning, what is the problem? And how are they solving it today? The next question then is, why does their world need changing? Because honestly, maybe it doesn't. Then you can ask the question, when can you say mission accomplished? And finally, this is finally where you talk about your product. You can ask, how are you bringing this about? What is your product doing to be able to bring about this change? And so in the radical product thinking way, to answer these questions, the RPT way gives you this fill in the blank statement so that you can focus on these questions instead of being stuck on finding the right words, right? There's no reason to wordsmith. Your vision has to be authentic and deeply felt. It has to be a conviction. It doesn't have to be a slogan. And so with that, let's talk about how did we apply this at NAC. We started with a vision. And in thinking about our vision, we really had to rethink our product as a mechanism for change, right? So the change that Paul envisioned was spreading kindness and getting people to pay it forward. And the product was just an app to be able to get people to participate in these random acts of kindness or random acts of coffee. Right? So that was this vision, thinking about a product as a mechanism to create change. And then once we had thought about a product as a mechanism for change, then we could write this radical vision statement. So this is how it would read. Today, when people who often go to coffee shops, so notice it's not everyone, it's people who often go to coffee shops. So when they want to spread kindness around them or say thank you to someone, they have to remember to pay it forward. And they have to overcome this awkwardness if they're trying to pay for a stranger. This is unacceptable because it results in these acts being rare and not a habit. We envision a world where spreading kindness is easy and it becomes a habit for people. We're bringing about this world through an app that makes it easy to create random acts of kindness by buying someone a coffee to brighten their day. Now, this vision is describing what we want to bring about. And maybe a year or two later, we're going to change this vision and maybe we expand beyond people who go to coffee shops. So don't think about your vision as this unchanging behemoth. Your vision can be very specific and you change that as you need to, as market needs change, as you discover what your users actually need, right? So once you have a vision, that's good, but you then need a strategy to translate that vision into a set of actionable steps. So in the radical product thinking way, a strategy is detailed. Again, it's not this fluffy 2-page document where you say, we're going to invest 10 million in this initiative and it's going to result in a $50 million ROI, right? Like that's not that's not helpful to anyone. And so a good product strategy answers 4 questions. And the easy to remember mnemonic is RADICAL or RDCL, which stands for real pain points. That's the R, meaning what's the pain that makes someone come to your product? This is where you do user research and customer journey mapping. The D answers the question, what's our solution to solve that pain? And this is where you apply design thinking. Next, you think about your capabilities, meaning what's the underlying engine that allows us to power this design? This is where you think about technical infrastructure, perhaps partnerships, relationships. All of these are elements of your engine. And then finally, you think about logistics, which is, by the way, the most often forgotten part of strategy. We always think, let's just build the product first, then we'll think about the business model or how we'll sell it, right? But instead, those have to be comprehensive elements of your strategy. You need to think about your business model. How are you going to support this product? How will you train people on it? So in the case of NAC, we had to start by asking, what's the pain point? What makes someone engage with this product? So in NAC's case, right, I as a user, I'm joining to claim a coffee that someone sent me, but I hesitate to buy someone a coffee. I've just never done this before. And so what's the solution to this? The solution is we need to get users to experience this joy of giving someone a coffee, and we need to get them to experience this joy before we can teach them to pay for someone else's coffee. So that's the solution. In terms of capabilities, we had to think about, well, what's the engine that's going to power the solution? Because we don't have infinite funding to keep giving away coffee, right? And so in terms of capabilities, Paul went and established partnerships with brands so that we could deliver a feature that basically meant that each user gets 2 coffees, not one. One coffee is the coffee they consume. The second coffee, they must gift to someone else. So this way we're teaching someone to gift a coffee. And then later we'd add the payments feature so that you can buy someone a coffee, right? And then finally, in terms of logistics, we changed our pricing model. We made our pricing model so that our pricing was now a percentage of a brand's sponsorship fee. And these were brands that wanted to get behind this message of spreading random acts of coffee. Okay, so that was our strategy. Next, we had to prioritize all these things we had to do into a set of next steps, right? And so prioritization is where you deal with this pesky problem of survival, meaning we talked about the long-term vision. Well, now you have to survive long enough to achieve that vision, right? So what does that mean? It means that you have to think about priorities, kind of like the yin and yang. This is what we intuitively do, but it's good to make it explicit. The yin and yang is we think of the long term versus survival, which is short term. So for your team, it's important to display this yin and yang. And the easiest way to do that is to display it as an X and Y axis. So you can communicate how you think about this yin and yang, right? And so your Y-axis is vision fit. Is this good for the vision or not? And the X-axis is this good for survival or not? Right? So things that are good for vision and survival, well, those are easy decisions. That's ideal, right? But if we only focus on those easy decisions, just what is ideal, then we're still being myopic, because sometimes you need to invest in the vision. That's when it's good for the vision fit, but it's not helping you in the short term. And the opposite of that is when we're doing things that are good for survival, good for the short term, but they're not good for the long-term vision. Remember we talked about obsessive sales disorder? Well, every time we are doing things like custom features, maybe it's not good for the vision, but hey, it helps us win that deal. That's taking on vision debt. It's like technical debt, but on the vision side, right? And too much of that leads to obsessive sales disorder. And so how did we prioritize things across these quadrants? Well, we started by investing in the vision. We realized that we had to throw out the complete code base and restart development. The code base was just such a mess. And so we had to start by investing in the vision. Then what did we do? Then we built this feature of giving people 2 coffees each, one to drink and one to gift. But to support that ideal feature, we had to do something under vision debt. We had to take on vision debt. We had to build some functionality so that brands could see their marketing campaign and how many people they had reached through this campaign. And without that, brands weren't going to get interested. And so we needed to take on a little bit of vision debt to be able to support the rest of what we were doing. So this is how we prioritize things. This approach to prioritization, by the way, really helps convey to your team how you think about these trade-offs, so that even when you're not in the room, when your developer is making decisions without you, that they can think like you. This helps you spread your influence, right? And one last feature was the ability to take a payment from the user. It wasn't helpful in the short term, but it was good for the long term. We needed to start to teach them to take payment or to pay for buying someone a coffee. So those were priorities. Then we translated it into hypothesis-driven execution and measurement. What do I mean by that, right? We had a key hypothesis. Our strategy, like we could write a hypothesis on our strategy, and that hypothesis was, if the experiment we run works, then this is the outcome that we expect, because this is the connection. And so our hypothesis was, if we train users to give a coffee that's sponsored by brands, then by gifting this free coffee, users are more likely to then spend their own money to spread kindness, because they'll start to enjoy spreading kindness through coffee. So that was our key hypothesis. And there were two metrics then we started measuring, which was the number of people who are gifting free coffees from brands and the number of people who are spending their money to gift coffees, right? And so what did we find? We found that, initially, if you remember, 0% of people were paying it forward. But once they had learned to gift a free coffee, we were finding that 27% of people, and this was just the first try, just with the first try, 27% of people were now spending their own money to buy someone a random act of coffee, right? And so the key point here is that all of those popular metrics, such as daily users, time spent on site, NPS scores, I'm not saying they're irrelevant. Those are things that are important to measure, but they weren't indicators of progress towards NAC's vision. And so a key metric that we measured was this measure of, the percentage of users who are using their own money to spread kindness. So the key takeaway here is that we need to build radical products, right? And the definition of a radical product is that it's your constantly improving mechanism for engineering change. We talked about delighting customers at the very beginning. Where does delighting customers fit in? Delighting customers is only a means to an end. It's a means to an end to create the change that you want to see. If you piss off customers, well, it's going to be hard to create change, right? Because nobody will engage with your product. So yes, delighting customers is important, but only as a means to create the change you want to see. Now that I've given you the example of NAC, what I want to share with you is that you can apply these ideas anywhere where you want to create change. And I want to share with you a truly inspiring example, one that means a lot to me. And I interviewed the head of this organization for my book. And I think the whole story of how incredibly vision-driven this organization is something for all of us to learn from. And the example I want to share with you is an organization that makes papadums. So, if you've eaten papadums, which are the lentil crackers you get in restaurants, in Indian restaurants, right, which are often eaten with chutney. Well, most of us have eaten papadums, but it's unlikely that you would know the secret that actually there's one organization that dominates the papadum market. And this organization has 60% market share in papadums, and the rest of the market is hugely fragmented. They have over $220 million in annual revenues. And the most important fact, they're owned by 45,000 women who are all equal partners. So let me share the story of Lijjat and how it started. Lijjat started in 1959, and it was started by 7 women. What they wanted, the change that they wanted to create, was that they wanted to earn a dignified living. These women lived in a patriarchal society, And they were dependent on their husbands for income. They couldn't contribute to household income because they weren't educated. And their only skill, they felt, was cooking. And so they didn't have job prospects, but they wanted to educate their kids so that they could raise their kids, raise that next generation out of poverty. And so these 7 women got together and they decided that they would make papadums, which are, by the way, really a labor of love. Papadums are hard to make, and my grandmother knew how to make them, but I've never seen my mom make them, for example. Right? And so these women got together, they decided they would make papadums, they would sell the papadums, and whatever they got out of it, they would split the profits or losses equally amongst themselves. So that's how this started with 7 women. So they started rolling papadums on their building's terrace. And soon these 7 women became 25. And at the end of a year, they became 300 women. And soon they no longer fit on the building's terrace. Well, today, papadums are made by Lijat member sisters still, but they have a huge operational system where these buses pick up women from different pickup locations. Then they bring them to these centers to pick up dough. The member sisters then take the dough back home and they roll papadums at home. The next day, they come back, they drop off the papadums they rolled, they pick up the next batch of papadums or next batch of dough to roll, and then they get paid for what they had rolled, right? And every 6 months, they share an equal percentage of profits. So if you talk to any of these Lijat women, you don't hear a slogan. What you hear is a deep, heartfelt conviction. Each person shares a vision statement in their own words, but it's the same thing that they all say. And I wrote this down, based on what the president of Lijat said. The change that they envision is bringing financial independence to women by allowing them to earn a dignified living. And papadums is just their mechanism for creating that change. And so I wrote their vision in this format after listening to the president of Lijat. So their vision would say, today when women without education from poor households, when they want to run their household and when they want to educate their kids, they have to depend on their husband's income and they can't influence household spending. This is unacceptable because it limits their children's educational prospects and it repeats the cycle of poverty. We envision a world where women become self-reliant and it leads to their socioeconomic progress. We're bringing about this world through high-quality papadums and later other fast-moving consumer goods without ever taking charity. So that was their vision. But as you know, vision is only the first step in engineering change. They needed a strategy. And that means asking, well, what are the real pain points? What do these women need for a dignified living? And there are 2 main pain points. One is that, they have a high work ethic, but low education. The second pain point is super important, which is that these women are primary caregivers in a patriarchy, which means they have elders or kids to take care of at home, and they cannot leave home for very long. So these women couldn't go and work in factories, for example. So the design meant that these women needed to work from home. So the entire operational model for Lijat is based on these women being able to work from home.
Sorry, Radhika, sorry to jump in. We've just gone quite a few minutes over time. So just if you could try to wrap up in the next minute or so, that'd be great. Apologies for interrupting.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for that. So the quick version then is in terms of logistics, these women then, they had to adopt training, for example, training to think about decentralized quality control. A lot of the capabilities were also about how do you have this mindset for sharing profits equally. But I'll let you read about this in the book. But, this was also applied to prioritization and, how do you apply all of these ideas in your priorities so that you can create change very systematically. So it involved investing in the vision, rarely taking on vision debt, and doing more things in ideal quadrant, as well as investing in the vision. And in terms of how Legit measures success, it's by the number of women to whom they give financial independence. And that's about 45,000 women. And so the key takeaway is that you can engineer change that you want to bring about by taking this systematic approach. And if you'd like to learn more, you can get the Radical Product Thinking book. You can ask about workshops and Radical Product Thinking training. You can download the free toolkit on radicalproduct.com. And lastly, you can message me on LinkedIn, and I would love to answer your questions as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing. That was really interesting. I've actually got a few questions to ask, but unfortunately we're a little bit over time. So what I'll do is I'll post those questions in on the Slack channel that I've invited you to. So if you could go in there and answer those, and if anybody has any questions, please do post them. And what I'll do is I'll copy those across to the Slack channel as well. But thank you very much, Radhika, for sharing.
Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure.
Excellent. So moving on to our next talk, up next we have Ankur, who will be talking about designing for organic social behavior. So I'd like to welcome Ankur to the stage.
Rory, thanks a lot. I hope you can hear me and see my screen.
Yep,
well.
Everything's great. So over to you.
Beautiful. Thanks a lot. Happy to be here. Just to introduce myself a little bit, I've been a product designer for the past 5 years, and I've designed for companies like Dilno, which is the largest South Asian social dating app in the world, as well as founded a company called Weekend, which focused on creating meaningful in real life social interactions. And so essentially this space is something that I'm personally very fond of. And while this talk does go over things in a very high level, I'd love to have conversations about any and everything that you guys see in this. So what does organic social behavior mean? That's a lot of words, but at the end of the day, it just means how people behave in very natural, organic settings. When you wake up in the morning and drive to work, what does that commute look like? When you meet your colleagues, what does that look like? When you come home, meet your family, watch TV together, when you go out and meet your friends for brunch. All of these things, how humans naturally behave, that's all organic social behavior. There's nothing else to it. One thing that I want to touch on before anything else, before going and looking at other products and features, I want to talk about the constancy of humans. And if there's one thing you take away from this whole presentation, if there's one thing that makes this half hour worth it for you, it's this thing. Human needs have been constant for the last, well, as long as you can imagine, for the last 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 years. That little pyramid you see on the right, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, while it can be debated back and forth, it serves as a pretty good approximation for how humans have very basic physical and biological needs. Those core drivers have been the same throughout human history, throughout recorded human history, because evolution is very slow. And because our needs haven't changed so much, our social structures have evolved in appearance, but in bare essence, they're still the same. So essentially, we still have the same family, community, and relationship needs as people in ancient Egypt. Our social needs have not changed so much. And so because of that, the way we design for organic social behavior is by empowering pre-existing behaviors, is by reinforcing pre-existing relationships, and by gamifying social interactions. We're not starting from scratch. Humans already have existing behaviors, relationships, and interactions that we want to empower, reinforce, and gamify respectively. To summarize all of this, if I could say all of this in two sentences, you cannot change basic human behaviors. What you can do, and the only thing you can do, is rechannel or reinforce existing behaviors. To reiterate, you cannot change basic human behaviors. All you can do for some people is create better habits for them, which is about tuning the dial on existing behaviors. How do we design for organic social behavior? I think it's very important to ask the questions in the right way. The question is not what features do I need for organic social behavior, but how do humans behave naturally in a specific situation? How do humans behave? How do humans do this offline? How do humans do this when it's not virtual? Essentially, we talked about several settings of organic human behavior. So how do humans accomplish those things with other humans when they're not doing this on an app or a product that you're building? How can I empower humans to behave the same way, to behave naturally in virtual settings? That's what we're exploring. And again, to reiterate, you cannot change basic human behaviors. When I say rechannel, I mean take an existing human behavior and move it to a different medium. So if I'm having a conversation with you in person, that we can rechannel through WhatsApp or a Zoom call or a phone call. Those are rechanneling existing behaviors where we want to have conversations with each other. So let's talk a little bit about social discovery platforms. There's a few types of social discovery platforms. The biggest subset of this is content discovery platforms, which include TikTok, Reddit, Instagram, and even Facebook groups these days has been making a huge push towards content discovery. A content discovery platform is essentially where you find different niches of content. So if I'm interested in board games, I might find a TikTok section for board games or a subreddit for board games. The people discovery platforms usually help you find people of a specific type. For example, people you'd want to date or people you'd want to make friends with. Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, and Facebook are good examples of these. And lastly, event discovery is another niche where you discover local events or events around town or virtual events around the world. Meetup, Eventbrite, and even Facebook events are great examples of that. For the purpose of this conversation, we're going to talk about content discovery platforms because they have very interesting and advanced features that enable social discovery as well as social interactions in a very natural and fluid way. So most social content platforms like Reddit, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, they have 3 levels of interaction that people do on them. 90% of people, who I kindly call explorers here, other platforms might call them lurkers. 90% of people do not engage actively on these platforms. What 90% of people do is just consume content, discover new content, and keep essentially scrolling on their feeds. Then there are the other 9% of people, I call them affirmers. They are also called low engagement folks. Essentially, these folks do not engage very heavily. They will engage with other created content, but they won't create a lot of content themselves. And lastly, we have the kings and queens of social media, the creators, the folks who actually create original content and bring it to social media, the folks who allow affirmers and explorers to exist and enjoy being on these platforms. They create new content. And so what we're going to be looking at over the next few slides is essentially how to serve the explorers, the affirmers, and the creators in a social media space. And just to tie this back, I will keep tying things back to how humans do this organically. Just to tie it back, most social events where we go usually have this sort of composition. For example, if you go to a sporting event, most people are watching the sports, there's a few people playing, and then there's more people selling hot dogs and organizing the event. Those are the affirmers. So essentially you have a sports team that is a creator, and you have the stadium and the people selling hot dogs who are affirmers, and you have explorers who are watching the event. So how do we design for exploration? In the wild, discovery is essentially the act of finding something unexpectedly or during an intentional search. How people did discovery before social media is, for example, a merchant finding a new marketplace looking for wares to trade. A scholar enters a library looking for a specific book or a piece of information. A grad student walks into a bar looking for a potential date, or an executive at a networking event who's looking for an interesting group to walk into and join. Discovery is all about finding the right fit of content or people for you. And so 90% of people, 90% of the time on social media are exploring, they're discovering new content. And so how do you best serve an explorer? We're going to look at the feature called the infinite feed, which Facebook invented in 2006. This feature alone was one of 2 or 3 things that was single-handedly responsible for the behemoth Facebook is today. Before the feed, there was no inherent method of discovery wherein people could see each other's posts easily. MySpace had a very rudimentary version, but the feed is the first thing to revolutionize social media. It made social media social, and it made social media a content-driven media. Today, it's responsible for all social media engagement globally. But again, to look at why this works, we need to understand what it simulates that is unnatural human behavior. The infinite feed simulates window shopping or gauging a crowd. When you walk into a room, you quickly glance through everyone and you identify potential fits for conversations. When you walk into a shop, you browse around, you walk around, you think about buying different things, but you don't really buy them. The infinite feed is a very low effort way to glance through a ton of content the same way. You can just keep scrolling. You don't have to stop for any content. The one thing that makes this gamified, the one thing that really makes the infinite feed powerful is the personalization system, which can create a strong variable reward. Variable rewards have been proven to be much more powerful than static rewards. For example, if I give you a candy every 5 times you pressed a button, versus if I gave you candy every 1 to 10 times you pressed a button, you probably have much more fun pressing the button in the second version because you never know when you're going to get that reward. So essentially, in the act of discovery, when you come across an amazing post, the dopamine that hits your brain is much stronger than if we gave you every post at the same quality. And so that's one of the ways in which the feed is gamified to make you hooked onto other people's content. One thing I want to ask everyone, and this is not something I want to go into, but if you want to take this away as homework or just learn more about it, why does TikTok's feed work so well? TikTok has taken over social media. TikTok was responsible for over 40% of social media engagement last year, and it has absolutely taken over the world by storm. There are many reasons for this, and I suggest you read a really interesting article by Eugene Wei on this. Heavily recommend it, but definitely something to think about in terms of the design of the product as well as how their feed works. Next, we come to the profile swipe. As someone in the dating space, this is one of my favorites. The profile swipe was created by Tinder in 2012, and today it's the building block for dating apps everywhere. But we want to talk about why this works and what it mimics. And so the profile swipe just simply mimics the natural way you glance at someone and kind of rate their attractiveness if you're interested in them as a potential match. Humans, whether we like it or not, love to judge each other. We love to internally make a decision on whether this person's a quick match. And swiping is a very easy, very quick way to do that. And we all love doing it. The simple way this is gamified is that Tinder caps daily swipes. And so every day you can only swipe on 10 to 20 to 50 people. And the next day you'll get a notification asking you to keep swiping. And like I said, even if you're not really looking for a match, it's fun swiping on people. It's fun judging people. It's a very natural human behavior. And that's why Tinder worked so very well with the same variable reward system where you might find that soulmate after maybe 3 swipes or 10. You never know. To expand a little bit on the swipe system, Hinge is a product that does things a little bit differently and has in recent years come out as much more successful than Tinder. What Hinge does differently is that it lets you, in double quotes, shoot your shot, where it lets you add a single message along with sending a like. And the reason that's interesting is because when you look at organic social behavior, when people do this naturally, their chemistry is usually formed by one person walking up to the other and saying something bold or provocative, or even a simple hi. And it's that asymmetry that creates the tension of chemistry and then builds on the relationship moving forward. So it's not just two people looking at each other, it's someone walking up to another person and saying, hey, I like you, let's talk. And so given that that's how humans naturally bond and mate, Hinge actually does really well among women. Hinge has one of the best balance in gender ratios on dating apps, narrowly beating Bumble at 36% women, which is much better than Tinder's often 20 to 25% based on which country it's in. So definitely check out Hinge if you're single. Next, we moved to designing for affirmation. We looked at a few ways that we can help explorers. Affirmation is essentially about emotional support or encouragement. In the wild, if you look at how people affirm others socially, naturally, in a rally, a political leader might shout a slogan, the crowd might salute back and say the slogan and cheer. Or even a colleague says something profound, you just smile and nod your agreement. Your favorite football player scores, so you and your friends stand up and start cheering in the stands. All of this is affirmation. The reason affirmation is very, very extremely important is that most human conversational content is about emotional affirmation. Every conversation, even whether you're at work, whether you're talking to your spouse or an emotional significant other, every conversation is wrapped in of affirmations. So I would say next conversation you have, pay attention to how much of your time you spend reinforcing the other person's emotional state. You're going to find that it's about 70 to 80%. And so this comes back to one of the classics of social media, the like button. The like button was created by Facebook in 2009. That's just 14 years ago. I don't think any of us can imagine a life without the like button, but it's just been 14 years since it came out. And the staggering statistic is in that the 7 years after the like button came out, we've seen 1.13 trillion likes. In a world where every B2B salesman is trying to get people to click one button once to convert, we've seen 1.13 trillion button clicks. That's how easy and ubiquitous the like button is. The reason it works is very simple. The reason it works is because affirmation is a very, very important part of human conversation and human behavior, human social behavior. It's as simple as just an approving nod, just saying, yeah, I like what you said. And it's very, very easy. It's one tap, positive affirmation for any content, any channel, any media. The way the like button is gamified is actually interesting. It's not gamified for the person liking, but it's gamified for the creator, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. Another very low-hanging fruit that enables social media for affirmers is the comment section. The comment section was created a very, very long time ago. It was one of the first pieces of affirmation created, one of the first ways that people could affirm back in 1998. And it was an initial part of blogs back in the day. It was popularized first in Tumblr. And the reason it works is because it opened up the gates to powerful creator-fan relationships or creator-consumer relationships. The comment section is actually the thing that gave birth to influencers and people who could start talking back to their fans live, because there was no other way for them to communicate on the same channels outside of something like an IRC chat, which was just very hard because nobody was live all the time. And essentially it simulates a fan being able to shout, "We love you," in the crowd. So it gives fans a voice. And that was what gave birth to influencers a long time ago. One thing I want to ask everybody here and everybody watching this, and these are all questions that I asked myself and found very interesting questions and led to a lot of insights. When would you in a social platform use the post comment style versus the chat style? The post comment style, for example, on Facebook is when someone makes a post, whether that's a text post or a photo, and then everybody else sort of comments on that, versus you have a Discord style or a WhatsApp style chat. What are the differences between the two? What does each facilitate and what does each promote? And when would you use each? Just something to think about and consider. Next, we move on to the 1%, the people who actually make social media work. We move on to the creators. You know who they are. In the wild, we've seen creators all the way back from the dawn of time, from philosophers imparting knowledge through stories to their students sitting around them, gladiators dueling in the Colosseum, a bard singing for his supper in a tavern, a traveling circus troupe, a radio jockey, a news anchor, and even today, a sports team. These are the creators. These are the people who draw crowds around them. These are the people who are in the thick of it all while everybody else is cheering from the sidelines. The way we allow creators or enable creators and reinforce creators to keep creating content, the main way is status systems. There are many reasons creators create content. Some of them are very altruistic or want to just display their art. But most of what drives most creators today is status systems and earning social capital. This is a huge topic, and so I'm not going to cover it in a lot of detail in this very moment, but it is an incredible topic to look into. The way status systems work is essentially you put content out there into the internet, and in exchange, you get status. And that social capital, that status, is measured by a number, whether that's a number of followers, likes, comments, karma on Reddit, whatever it is. Social capital is what you accumulate through these numbers, through this gamification, in order to essentially say, hey, my brand on YouTube is 150,000 followers, 150,000 viewers. Look at my video, it got 1 million views. The reason this works is because people are status-seeking monkeys. I apologize if that's offensive. That is a direct quote taken from a beautiful blog post on this called Status as a Service. Highly recommend looking it up. But essentially, people are status-seeking monkeys. People seek out the most efficient way to maximize social capital. What does that mean? People want status. Most people today, whether it's me or you, want social status. When we talk to another person, we want them to respect us. We want them to appreciate us. Social media is one very interesting way to get social status, to earn social status, because it's very easy to say, I have 150,000 followers and command respect on a certain platform. It's also a way to convert social capital into other forms of capital. If I have 150,000 followers, they're probably clicking ads. They're probably going to buy some of my merchandise. They're probably going to sign up for an online course I have. They're probably going to allow me to cross-promote other products as an influencer. So essentially, the main way you promote creation of content on your platform is building systems that allow the storage of social capital, the storage of social capital. And so, yeah, it's gamified pretty easily. Numerical stores of these status naturally make you want to push those numbers higher because we're all competing that way. And they create milestones. When you're at 100K, you want to hit 150. When you're at 150, you want to hit 200. That's how it just works. Status systems, very important piece of the creator ecosystem when it comes to social media. Another small, interesting feature which revolutionized social media in a way is the repost, the retweet, or the reblog button right there on Twitter. It was popularized initially by Tumblr. It's a very old feature which started off with blogs, but we see it very powerfully in the share features in Facebook and Instagram and the retweet button on Twitter today. The reason it works is because it creates an entirely new, different kind of creator. It creates a type of creator that essentially specializes in curation instead of creating original content. It allows you to create a curator. A curator is essentially a person that has one niche and accumulates and curates content along that one niche. So for example, you could have meme pages. I, for example, have seen a lot of meme pages that are specifically about South Asians and Indians on Facebook. You could have sports pages that retweet sports news. You could have people that retweet news about AI. So essentially, this helps you create the curator, which doesn't need to create their own content, but play arbitrage and sell the content of others in one package on social media. Lastly, one huge phenomenon that I want to talk about that is a growing space is live chat. For those of you who don't know what Twitch is a platform where you have gamers who play games, content creators who are live streaming themselves playing games, and you have a live chat where you can talk to the streamer and the streamer can essentially look at what you're saying and respond back to you. It essentially mimics a live social event, very similar to a sports game or a comedian interacting with the crowd or a circus, a gladiator match. The reason this is so powerful is because since the dawn of time, the most powerful social glue that we've ever had have been live social events. Live social events have been the backbone of human community from all the way back when we used to have village fairs, when we used to just have fairs crossing by, circuses crossing by, when we had gladiatorial events where everybody came around to watch, when we had religious events. Live social events have always been the one thing tying humanity together socially. It's the one thing we pay money for. We don't pay money for friendship. We pay money to have excuses to spend time with our friends. And so live chat perfectly captures the situation of catching someone doing something live while being able to chat with our friends and interact with the event live. And so it fulfills both a social need and a content need for explorers and affirmers. You can watch your favorite content along with the people you really care about. And lastly, it provides an interactive stage for creators so they're able to fine-tune their content better for their viewers. So definitely live chat, one of the best ways we've seen of creating social content that promotes very organic behavior because it very closely simulates something that is the backbone of human social behavior. Live chat is also seen on things like Instagram Live, Twitch Live. We're going to see much more of this as we move forward. So using all of these concepts, thinking about why certain features work and how they gain traction, one thing that's very interesting to think about is why did Clubhouse fall off? If you don't know what Clubhouse is an app where you can talk in rooms to each other. You can join rooms and just start free-flowing conversations. Clubhouse reached its peak about last year when it was valued at $4 billion. It had an incredible growth team. You had people like Elon Musk showing up in Clubhouse rooms. Incredible product, very fun to use, very well branded. But unfortunately, Clubhouse fell off, and this year it's about 60% down from its peak user base. So one thing that I really like to think about, and I have a lot of theories, but I'd love to hear from you. Why did Clubhouse fall off? And I think there are some interesting answers based on how people use products organically and what Clubhouse might be missing. I want to end this with a few trends that we're seeing in social today. Just if you're exploring social products, if you're listening to this because you want to explore social products, these are some places where I see a lot of growth and potential. One is creator economies. Products like platforms like Patreon, like Substack, like OnlyFans. We see creators becoming much more independent. We see content creation become much more democratic and decentralized, where people can directly charge money for the content they create instead of having to go through a platform like YouTube. And so we're seeing this being fueled by the growing cloud of influencers today who are able to go multi-platform and just create a very niche fan base just because there's so many people online and watching today. The second thing is social commerce. We've already seen TikTok and Instagram try social commerce. Brands have started realizing that individuals, content creators, are very powerful mouths and brands for them. We're seeing a lot of individuals very successfully sell products on TikTok and Instagram. So for example, TikTok a few months ago launched a way to buy products directly off TikTok pages. So we're going to see a lot of growth in social commerce where you see individual creators trying to sell products. And lastly, this is my favorite and this is my jam, so I had to give it a shout out. We're seeing a huge wave of startups that are focusing on IRL, that are focusing on meeting up in real life. Two products I want to give a shout out to in that space are Clockout and Saturday. Both are very new products. Both are exploring ways in which you could actually connect with the people around you, the people in your neighborhood, the people in your community, and create serendipitous moments where you just rediscover, rekindle a spark with someone you haven't seen in a long time, or a stranger who just lives near you and shares a lot of your interests. That's about it. That's all I have for now. If you have any questions, I would love to hear it. I would love to have deeper discussions on this. I'm available on LinkedIn. I'm available on my website. I'm available through UXDX channels. So if you have any questions or any thoughts, always open to hear. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or anywhere else. That's about it. Thanks
Excellent.
a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ankur. That was really, I really enjoyed that because it kind of, you went deep into each of the different kind of categories and how to focus on them. So I hope everybody out there enjoyed it as much as I did. We have time for a few questions because we did start a little late. So if anybody has any questions, then please do post them in and I'll ask them to Ankur. But one, I kind of have two questions, but I'll go with the one because those last two apps that you mentioned there, Saturday and Clockout, they seem to me to fall into the same category as Clubhouse. And to me, the problem with Clubhouse is that I need to kind of be there at the exact same time as somebody else, and otherwise it's gone. I've lost it. So what was yours? Because I was waiting to hear your opinions on why Clubhouse hasn't succeeded. So what are your opinions?
For why Clubhouse hasn't succeeded?
Or sorry, it has. I guess it has from a generic point of view. It's a success story, but rather why it has the drop off.
So, Rory, I think the main two reasons I can give off the top of my head, this is a longer conversation, but one, Clubhouse doesn't have a very good way to store status. It does have a follower count, but it is very hard to catch someone on Clubhouse unless you also come online at the same time. And so it is very hard for your followers to catch you. And secondly, Clubhouse is very bad at signal to noise ratio. So for example, there might be a 1 hour conversation where your favorite people are speaking, but how much of that time is actually high quality content? I'm going to assume maybe there's 5 to 10 clips you can make out of that, 10-second segments, which would be extremely insightful to you. And the rest of that time is not very insightful. And so you see these clips on Instagram, you see these clips on Twitter, and you love Twitter and Instagram because you find these insightful clips. But on Clubhouse, you have to sit through the recording. On Clubhouse, there's no way to find these high impact clips. And so on Clubhouse, I just think it's very hard to find signal among all the noise.
That's great. Two great examples there. And we have you toyed where? I'm probably saying that really wrong, but he's saying he's looking for your LinkedIn, so we'll share that afterwards. So yeah, I'll share that. The last question that I have, I guess we are just a little bit over time, so I'll post this onto the UXDX Slack group. But the question I was going to have kind of came to Andrew Chen's book about the cold start problem, where he talks about tools and networks. So your whole point about the status symbol, to me, I kind of feel like that's almost the network side, but you also need the underlying tool as well. So which should you try to build first? Do you try to build the network and then attach a tool, or do you try to build the tool and attach the network? So yeah, that to me would be the tool being Clubhouse, and then the network sits on top, or Instagram is the filters, and then the network sits on top. So,
that's an excellent question. Yeah, I actually had 3 or 4 slides on everything you mentioned. Essentially, that falls along the utility scale, right, of a network and what bare utility it provides you in single player. I just felt my presentation had gone on long enough, so I had to cut. But absolutely a wonderful topic to discuss.
Great. So I'll post that into the Slack group, and with you, Toyd, I'll share your question as well, who's just thrown in a question as well. So I'll invite Ankur to the Slack group, and hopefully you can answer the questions there. Excellent. So that brings us to the end of our session for today. So thank you everyone for joining us. Had 2 fantastic talks and some really good questions coming in there at the end. But if you like this kind of content and event that we're running, then please do consider joining us in person, where we get people together for real life networking, as Ankur was saying. We'll have 500 attendees, 25 plus speakers, there's 8 workshops. We're in New York from the 16th to the 18th of May. So if you would like to come and join us, it's going to be a fantastic event. And we always talk about the full product team. So it's got product, UX, design, and dev at that. So please do join us there. But if not, I look forward to seeing you at the next UXDX online event.